At the end of World War II, we thought that the world was liberated, and there was a sense of unity across the globe. Unfortunately, history tells us otherwise. This is the story of a race for genius. Not the kind of genius that can cure cancer or world hunger, but the kind of genius that can put missiles in the sky and threaten to wipe a country off the face of the earth. This is Operation Paperclip, the real-life Metal Gear story. In April of 1945, as Allied forces moved further into German lines, many German scientists were being found. T-Force, which was a joint US-British mission, was responsible for securing these scientists and technology before they could be sabotaged by fleeing Germans. Operation Overcast first started as a way to facilitate the United States' involvement in the war in the Pacific, as well as their research efforts at the end of the war, but this quickly turned into something much bigger. Approximately 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were eventually brought over. In November of 1945, Operation Overcast was rebranded to Operation Paperclip. This was because military officers would put paperclips on the folders of the Nazi scientists whose records were politically rehabilitated or bypassed. The operation was a desperate safeguard to keep German minds and their terrifying vengeance weapons out of Soviet hands. While the world eventually focused on the 1960s space race, the real war began much earlier. It was a race for the ultimate delivery system, the rockets capable of carrying a nuclear warhead across an ocean. In Hideo Kojima's video game Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, the player is introduced to Dr. Sokolov, a pawn between the East and the West. He describes Shagohod as a bridge to space, functioning as a mobile launch platform for nuclear missiles, providing the reach necessary to strike any global target, including the United States, while eliminating the vulnerability associated with fixed static silos. Little do you know, this is ultimately what the goal of Operation Paperclip was, to have the ability to fire a nuclear missile on any part of the world. The German V-2 rocket, which was developed by Wernher von Braun and his team, was the foundation of this bridge to space. They were forging the path to ICBMs, also known as intercontinental ballistic missiles. The V-2 wasn't just a rocket, it was a weapon of mass production. Over 3,000 V-2s were launched during the war, killing an estimated 9,000 civilians and military personnel, while an estimated 12,000 forced laborers died building them. On November 12, 1937, Wernher von Braun applied and became a member of the Nazi Party. Von Braun was not just a scientist, he was a major in the SS. In the eyes of Hitler, von Braun was the man who would deliver vengeance to London. His creations were to facilitate the Nazi regime's goal of conquering Europe and all of those who opposed them. He represented a party that wreaked havoc in all of Europe and committed crimes against humanity. But to the United States, he was a prized possession, one that could not hang at Nuremberg. In 1945, when Operation Paperclip was taking place, what came with von Braun was not just his dark history with the Nazi regime. Blueprints of weapons of mass destruction came with him. The United States, knowing that his history with the Nazis was not appealing to the general public, had to rebrand him. His Nazi records scrubbed, his connections with slave labor at the Mittelwerk factory nullified, and he went from being a war criminal to an American icon, a hero of the West, some may say. He became the director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. He was the man who put Armstrong on the moon and won the space race for the United States. He is the Sokolov of our world, a man whose mind was bought at the price of his soul. In Metal Gear Solid, the Philosophers Legacy was a fund of $100 billion collected by the world's superpowers, the United States, the Soviet Union, and China. This immense amount of money was to be used for the development of nuclear weapons, rocketry, advanced military research such as the Metal Gear prototypes. In real life, our Philosopher's Legacy was the military weaponry we know of today. Nerve gas, rocketry, jet engines. These were all tools that came with the scientists that came from Operation Paperclip.
Enemies change along with the times, the flow of the ages, and we soldiers are forced to play along. I didn't raise you and shape you into the man you are today just so we could face each other in battle. A soldier's skills aren't meant to be used to hurt friends. So then what is an enemy? Is there such a thing as an absolute timeless enemy? There is no such thing, and never has been. And the reason is that our enemies are human beings like us. They can only be our enemies in relative terms.
As the boss says in her monologue, enemies change with the times. Yesterday's Nazi is today's NASA director. In her view, there is no absolute timeless enemy. Our enemies are humans like us. But to the US during Operation Paperclip, our enemy was an asset that could potentially change the tides of the global power pyramid. They could make us the most powerful country and put us decades ahead of our rivals. 12 years after World War II, humanity achieved something it never thought possible. Sputnik was launched by the Soviet Union and put into orbit, making it the first man-made object to go to space. This shook the US government. If their rivals, the Soviet Union, are able to put a silver ball into orbit, they could most definitely put a nuclear warhead over Washington. Thus, the space race began. The US and Soviet Union began a race to reach a place no human has gone before, the moon. With the mass amount of scientists that came in from Operation Paperclip, the US was poised to win this race, no question. Wernher von Braun spearheaded the creation of the Saturn V rocket, and NASA was able to put 2 men on the moon by July 20th, 1969. In Metal Gear, the boss's will was for a world without borders, a world where soldiers were not being used as pawns. For a moment, her will was true. When Apollo 11 landed on the moon, the world was one for that brief moment. Unfortunately, it did not last.